We feel that this bill is like a Trojan horse. We keep discovering things in this bill, and the consequences of this bill have not been made fully clear.
The NDP is accusing the federal government of gutting environmental protections by burying critical environmental regulatory changes inside their massive 425-page budget bill. The NDP wants to break up the bill. They say they need more time to scrutinize the potential impact. They say environmental regulation should not be included in a budget bill. The federal government calls the opposition maneuvering a stalling tactic. It's actually limiting the debate to 1 week, raising lots of questions. Are the feds trying to rush the process to avoid proper scrutiny, or are they simply taking the steps to ensure the budget isn't tripped up by political posturing that they say will cost the Canadian economy? And there's been enough debate anyway. Let's find out what MPs are saying right now. This is the hot debate on the Hill with Parliamentary Secretary to the Environment Minister Michelle Rempel's here, the NDP House Leader Nathan Cullen's here, and we'll be getting Liberal Leader, we got the Finance critic Scott Brison, I couldn't see you, and Nathan Cullen's on his way. Well, we'll just get right down to it. Michelle Rempel, we'll start with you. The NDP introduced motions this afternoon that outline sections of the budget bill that should be split off. I'll just remind our viewers, if you don't mind, what the official opposition wants removed. They say sections on the Environmental Assessment Act, the Species at Risk Act, the Parks Canada Act, the National Roundtable on the Environment and the Economy Act, and the section that repeals the Kyoto Protocol, among others. Michelle Rempel, it's not usual that environmental regulation acts are included in a budget bill. Why not separate these to have more debate?
Well, thanks, Evan. As I said on your show last week, this bill is having a significant amount of study. First of all, the Budget Implementation Act itself is having some of the most debate that we've seen on this type of bill in about 20 years. And there will be a special subcommittee of the Finance Committee that's designed to look at these regulations. So we are having a robust debate on it. I know that the NDP, one of their members during the previous round of debate on this bill actually used the entire time. So, I'd be interested to hear from some of my opposition colleagues how they felt about that. But, I think it's important that we move this bill forward because it is about creating jobs and economic growth. But
what about the environment? I mean, I get the budget when it has to do with financial matters, of course, it matters to supply. But when it comes to environmental regulation, there's a lot of changes here. It's not usual to include those in this omnibus kind of bill. It is a big bill. Does it, because they're so significant, doesn't it merit sort of more separate debate so we can all kind of get into the details as opposed to trying to dig through this 425-page document, which is huge?
Well, I think the core of the question is, how do we ensure rigor in environmental process and ensure that we can drive to decision, not necessarily approval on major resource projects that have a window to market, that are going to be a major driver of our economy and creator of jobs over the next 25 years? How do we get that balance right? And that's really what this bill is about. We are also seeing strengthening of environmental laws. There's increases to the Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency's budget. We're ensuring that there's more stringent regulations around tanker traffic, around enforcement that comes out of the EAA process. So I guess what's frustrating is that I haven't heard one thing come out of the opposition other than process story. They haven't talked about this budget about the bill as far as changes. So
let's let Nathan Cullen do that. And Mr. Cullen, outside of the process that you want more debate on it, what specifically, and I mentioned some, Nathan Cullen, at the top of what the NDP is looking for, but what specifically do you think there has not been enough debate and there needs to be separate debate about when it comes to the environmental regulations?
What we just heard is stunning, Evan. As somebody who comes from the coast of British Columbia and has seen the incredible cuts to protecting our coastal waters from this very government, cutting the Environmental Assessment Office, and then to hear them patently tell these
in this budget.
they do this incredible thing, Evan, where they say we're announcing $15 million more just after they cut $85 million, and they call it an increase. That's conservative math when it comes to the environment. Look at very specifically. We need to be able to distinguish that this government is fundamentally stripping down environmental protections when it comes to very significant projects like pipelines, some of the very major mining proposals that are going on that need scrutiny. We built these regulations up over many years of experience and understanding that if you get these things wrong, the cost to the environment and the economy can be significant and last many years. The budget itself was bad, But this Implementation Act of 420 pages, 750-something clauses, is much worse because it lasts so much longer. So why not hive it off? It's got nothing to do with the budget. This is a misuse of a tool and an abuse of power. Let's get the conversation where it needs to be, talking about the environment there, talking about pensions where that's appropriate, talking about all of the other measures in this Act that have become a Trojan horse that the government has pushed into Parliament and expects Canadians to just simply trust them. And that's just not going to pass.
Let's get Scott Brison's view. But just to pick up, though, and I'll get Michelle Rempel on this, you talked about pensions, Nathan Cullen, there. We've just heard from the Canadian Association of Retired People. They've literally sent this out about 2 minutes ago. They're also calling on the parts of the amendments and the implementation that has to do with changes to old age security, raising the age to 67. They also want that hived off, much like the environmental groups want one. So they're saying they want that hived off as well, which is maybe why Nathan Cullen was just mentioning that. But Scott Brison, what's your view? Should these belong in this big bill, or does it need more debate at all?
Well, obviously not. And Michelle actually said a few minutes ago, this bill, this budget implementation bill, is all about streamlining environmental regulations. Now, think about what Michelle just said. She said this bill is all about streamlining environmental regulations.
I actually didn't say that.
And the reality is, she's right about that. That's what the focus of much of this bill is. That's why it should not be part of the budget implementation bill. And it's really something, Evan, to see the debate being led in the House of Commons for the budget implementation bill by the Minister of Natural Resources and the Minister of Environment last week. I mean, what's up with that? And beyond this, the Conservatives have created this false construct that anything good for the economy has to be bad for the environment, and anything that's good for the environment has to be bad for the economy, when in fact progressive governments in other countries are actually saying, wait a minute, the jobs of tomorrow, the jobs of the future, are going to be in the green economy. So you can actually have sound environmental regulations that coexist with economic growth in the green economy. And you can do both, actually. And the Conservatives have this backwards view that somehow environmental policy is always going to hurt jobs.
Can't the Finance Committee deal with all this, Mr. Brison?
Well, frankly, there are parliamentarians on the Environment Committee of the House of Commons who are far better suited, and the Natural Resources and Environment Committees that are far better suited to be dealing with those issues. The government, in fact, with a Liberal request from in the Senate, was agreed to by the Conservatives to actually break up the legislation in terms of the Senate committee that would look at it. Now, if that was good enough for the Senate, why not for the elected House? And frankly, if the government sees the wisdom of breaking it up, then why not break it up so we can not only discuss it and debate it, but why not for voting on it?
So
bring in
Michelle,
new legislation.
Let's get Michelle Rempel. Michelle Rempel, I mean, I know there's going to be a subcommittee for finance, but, you know, these are environmental regulations, okay? And again, I just reiterate, we've tried to find out how typical is it to tie in environmental regulation changes with a budget implementation. It's not that common. So what's the rationale here for doing this?
Again, this is about jobs and economic growth. You know, my colleagues opposite don't talk about these things in any of their rhetoric that they've mentioned here today. They don't talk about how we have an opportunity to look at regulations as legislators and ask, can we be doing things more effectively? You'll hear the NDP talk about, lobbying against jobs in the U.S., etc. What we have to do is make sure that we've got streamlined, effective regulatory processes that ensure that environmental rigor, that environmental protection, but also ensure that we can develop our economy.
But to be fair, you're the parliamentary secretary to the Minister of the Environment. Isn't
Yes.
your job to talk about stewardship of the environment, and let Mr. Oliver talk about natural resources? And see, when you say it's all about the economy first, isn't your portfolio the environment?
Well, it absolutely is. But again, we feel that we can ensure that environmental protection. You look at this, if you look at the content that's in this bill, again, we increase funding to the Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency. We increase stringent requirements for tanker traffic review. We ensure that there's more funding for the participant process. there's stuff in here that ensures rigor. None of this is being talked about, my colleague. It's all about
All right, I want to get to one more topic, but just Nathan Cullen responded. There is, the government has, for example, Joe Oliver pointed out, for the first time they're levying financial penalties for people that violate environmental regulations. That's putting teeth where there were no teeth before.
Yeah, infinitesimally small to the risk that they're putting our environment in. We have an environment minister that accuses anybody who's ever donated to an environment group in Canada as participating in money laundering, like they're somehow part of the mafia or some Colombian drug cartel. It is offensive that we no longer have an environment minister or someone working with him that actually cares about the environment. All you hear from these guys is about the oil sands full stop and how we need more pipelines and super tankers on BC's coast. It's an offense to Canadians. We wouldn't mind someone actually sticking up for the planet in this cabinet from time to time.
Go ahead, Mr. Brison.
Well, being a finance critic and vice chair of the House Commons Finance Committee, I'd kind of like us to be talking about the parts of the budget implementation bill that actually have to do with the budget. And you can see by this discussion tonight, we're having the discussion from the NDP and Liberals and the Conservatives about environmental legislation, about environmental policy and regulations. That's why this is such an asinine process that the Conservatives have put us in. We have members of Parliament who live and breathe environmental policy and environmental regulations, who know these files inside and out. They're on Environment Committee. They know what they're doing. They should actually have that legislation. It should be separate legislation. Michelle, if your changes are so good, why not let them stand up to parliamentary scrutiny with the parliamentarians who focus on this on an ongoing basis, who have an expertise on this, to actually study.
I just want to get Michelle Rempel to answer to Nathan Cullen about this laundering money. We've been talking about this. Opposition Leader Tom Mulcair has asked for a retraction or an apology. Imagine Canada, a group that represents charities and nonprofits, have asked Minister Kent to withdraw his comments unless he can name names of real groups that are laundering money, which is a criminal activity. I'll ask you again, Michelle Rempel, I've asked you before. Yeah. Will Minister Kent either A, retract, B, provide names of groups that are laundering money, or C, apologize?
Well, as I said on your program last week, the changes that we're looking at in the Charities Act, in the budget of this year, is to make sure that charities are operating within their scope. There's specific activities, limitations around political activities, and we want to make sure that those tax regulations are being followed. But I'll note this afternoon, I was looking at Twitter, and there was a major environmental group in this country who actually launched a fundraising campaign using the Prime Minister's name and referencing this bill. So I think what we need to focus on is ensuring that we're talking about the long-term sustainability of our environment and our economy.
But I get that. I get that, and there's lots of things on political activity. But on the laundering money is different than complying. So just on that, will he retract or apologize the laundering money, Michelle Rempel?
Again, I've spoken about how our government feels that we need to review the Charities Act to ensure that organizations are playing by the rules.
I know you guys want to get in there, but you're sort of dodging this question about the laundering money.
No. It's one of those yes or no's.
Will he? Are there any groups that you're actually investigating for laundering money? Will he retract it or name some names?
Well, again, speaking for myself, I think it's very important that charities do play by the rules. We've heard this from Canadians, that if there is political activity, that it's within scope, so that taxpayers' money is being respected in regard to the Tax Act.
Unfortunately, I know you both want to get in there. We're a little over, but I'll have you guys back. This is going to go on for a number of days. Nathan Cullen, Michelle Rempel, Scott Brison, I appreciate your time today on that.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks, Evan.
I'll invite you all back to talk about this more. Thanks.